I think this is a pretty interesting thing to talk about on my channel since I've been focusing so much on this class category. And before getting started, I want to point out that the frame design here is straight up ripped off of the Eachine Twig. They even called it the Twig. I'm pretty sure Eachine is the first person to do it. I did a little bit of research, maybe not enough, but yeah, I just wanted to point that out. It is an Eachine product. Eachine has been known to do this kind of thing in the past. The other thing I want to point out is just the tip. So when I put my SD cards in these little split kind of camera things, I actually put a piece of tape on the SD card itself, slip it into the slot, and then tape the tape to the quad itself. That's because a lot of times you'll crash really hard and the card will just fly out of the board and you'll just lose your SD card. This way at least you don't lose your SD card. Also, when you put the tape on, don't put the tape on the side of the pins, even if you put it above the pins, because when you put it in the PC board itself, the tape will hold the card off of the pins a little bit, and sometimes you get a little bit of error. So whatever you do, tape the non-pin side and stick it to your quad. All right, so let's go over this quad. This is really interesting because this quad weighs the same as this quad here, which is my TP3, the Toothpick 3, the design that I've been working so hard on. The motors are lighter, and it has a baby Caddx something or other in there. And another thing I want to point out up front is that this is yet another Caddx product, and I am not making this up. Literally almost every single Caddx product I receive has a fatal flaw that makes it unusable, and in this case the lens is not focused at all, and in the FPV feed it looks like you're flying through a dream state. Everything is just soft and fluffy, and it's not because the lens is out of focus, it's because the lens apparatus, or the board, the PC board, was mounted to the lens apparatus tilted. So it's like you have this little tilt shift effect in the camera, and it's just awful. And I'll talk about the baby turtle a little bit later as well, because I actually find the video quality out of it is surprisingly good. But let's talk about the quad now. So the quad comes with these 30-28, I think they're the Gemfan 30-25 props, and right off the bat, just throw these props away. They were kind of okay in the past, but there are better props now. The HQ 3x2 is much better than this prop, and the Gemfan 3018 prop is also much better than this prop. This prop has a annoying issue where it actually has a lot of pitch on it. I don't know if it's actually 25, but it actually has a lot more. It feels like it has a lot more pitch than it actually does. It's really poppy in the throttle, and it has really lacking grip somehow. It just is not a very well-performing prop by today's standards compared to the HQ 3x2 and the Gemfan 3018. So pick up any one of those. And my preference is the 3018. I did help develop that prop. I strongly helped develop that prop. I think it performs really nicely. The difference between the 3018 and the 3x2 is that the 3x2 basically has a little bit more speed, but it has a little bit less control. The 3018 is a lighter overall blade. The whole blade itself is lighter than the 3x2, so you generally have a little bit more control, and it's a much more zippy prop, and the low end of the throttle is a little bit more manageable. So that's kind of the characteristics that I prefer in a micro prop, so that's why it is made that way. So next, let's talk about the motors. These are 1105 5200 kV motors. I think that 5200 kV is actually pretty accurate as well. With this 3-inch prop, that seems like it should be a 3S kV for the setup, and in fact it probably is best on 3S. But the problem with 1105s, 1106s, 11.0 whatever height motors for 3-inch is that they lack control, and this is an area where I know I'm going to get some flack from people, because people have 1105s and 1106s and they love them, they think they fly fantastic, but I am just speaking from experience, having tested so many motors and having now developed so many motors, so many prototype motors with so many companies in this size class, that I can confidently say that the 11 size stator is just a little bit small for a 3-inch prop. When you give the 11 size stator more height, generally more height makes the motor want to zip through the low half of the RPM range, and so the low end of the RPM is a little bit touchy to control. Now, this does not extrapolate up to 5-inch, 4-inch, anything else, really just focusing on micro class 2.5 and 3-inch. That's generally what I have felt across several motors that I've tested. So there's not anything different here. The 1105 motor, it does run a 3-inch prop, and it is surprisingly efficient at running this 3-inch prop. However, the control is hugely lacking, and if you can tell from my flying, I'm flying by the seat of my pants. I'm not able to keep the quad in really good control. I can't do intricate moves with it. That's also made much worse by the fact that the FPV camera is just awful, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. But in general, I don't recommend 1105, 1106 for 3-inch. I know that the Diatone Cube comes with 1105, 1106 or something like that. It comes with 1105, and that again has the same issue. It does have really surprisingly good efficiency and surprisingly good speed for that flight time, but it just lacks in control. Now, the Mamba motors are generally a little bit more powerful somehow than most other micro motors, and they do perform better, but still it's not enough to make up the difference. Going with a wider motor, a 12 size motor, and a shorter height does feel better, and specifically a 13 size motor, in my opinion, is the best control I felt on a lightweight quad. And lightweight, I mean that the motor weight is really limited to around 6.5, maximum 7 grams for these really lightweight things, around 100 grams, or else it just starts getting a little bit heavy and a little bit spongy and squishy and more challenging to fly the quad nicely the way you want. This is getting really, really specific, but that's just my kind of high-level thought process for when I'm assessing these motors, and when I assess so many of these motors for the toothpick class and for all this stuff. I highly recommend not going with an 11 size motor for 3-inch. Now, that also is not true for 1S and other factors, but in general, for the 2S, 3S category, micro 3-inch twin blade, highly recommend 12 size or 13 size motors, and not such a tall motor like a 1206 or 1207. The 1206 just happens to be really inefficient as well. I can go on talking about this for an hour, so let's continue with the rest of the quad. Eachine is not a brand that makes anything. They are a brand that rebadges everything. So the boards in here are Happy Model boards. They are not Eachine boards, and as so, you have the very, very high likelihood of the flight controller burning out, because just keep that in mind that this Happy Model Crazy Bee board, the quality control has taken a sharp decline, and I have had very poor experiences on my side of things. Maybe you have a different experience. That's just my experience that I'm presenting. The VTX on this thing is actually totally fine. It is a Happy Model VTX, and it works great. What's odd is that the DVR VTX, the Diamond VTX DVR, has a little bit of reliability issues, and I have had 2 of them fail on me just totally randomly out of the blue, even though I would assume that they're using the same DVR components on that board. Who really knows? Whatever it is, this DVR seems to work fine, and I have had about 7 or 8 of them, and none of them have failed on me thus far. Now let's get to the baby turtle, which I think is a much more interesting discussion than all this together. And that's because the baby turtle's video, the quality of the video coming out, in my opinion only, please take this with a grain of salt, but I'm pretty sure that if people looked at these, if you personally watch the video footage side by side, raw, not like the YouTube compression stuff, side by side, you would prefer the video quality coming out of this baby turtle compared to the Tarsier or the Nano hybrid, whatever, from RunCam, which I haven't even tried yet, but I have one, and I've been meaning to, I just haven't gotten around to it. Because it is really crisp, really sharp, really nice. Kudos to Caddx for being able to pull that off. I wish that they would fix their quality control so that their products were actually usable. But this baby turtle, for a standalone HD camera only, I would say gets a thumbs up from me. I don't know what the price is, I haven't looked at it yet, but it's good enough for me to want to put that weight on my quad. Where it does fall flat on its face, aside from its quality control, is the FPV feed. It's a split product. The FPV feed is not good. The the user experience is also not the best. However, it is more reliable. It does turn on and just keep recording. It's also just 1080p 30, I believe. It might do 1080p 60. I'm not sure. I wasn't able to get the Wi-Fi working. That's that user experience issue. Wi-Fi working to be able to actually adjust the settings or whatever. But it doesn't even matter. You can see the quality of the camera regardless of the resolution. The resolution is not the most crucial aspect of these cameras at all. I know a lot of people like to focus on 4K, 8K, whatever, 1080p. That's not really the most important thing. The quality of the sensor and the lens is really what defines the quality of the camera. And in this case, I mean, I don't know how they pulled it off, but honestly, I prefer the view from this camera compared to the hybrid Nano or the Tarsier. Not the FPV feed, however. I wish that they would make a Tarsier-esque or hybrid-esque version of this baby turtle, because that would be awesome if it had this nano-sized camera with a separate FPV camera attached to it as well. Even if that FPV camera was a standalone, as long as it's like attached to the camera in a way that it's easy to mount, that would be really cool. And that is something that I would work really hard to put into a toothpick kind of product, because I think it's good enough to do that, because the FPV feed on this camera, if the lens was properly aligned, I think is suitable for use with Instagram and so many other areas, because the video quality is really nice and sharp. The field of view is suitable, could be a little bit more, but it's suitable for use. And yeah, that's my 2 cents on it. Of course, it's not fantastic. Of course, I always prefer a GoPro or something that's actually good. But hey, we're working with micros here, and we got to just take what we can get. So I hope this was helpful. Take care. Floss your teeth. Bye.